Honestly, I have a lot of questions, and I feel like you will too once we get through this. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to have you all back here with me again for another great video. If you are new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. My name is Sam and I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and makes sure you never miss another upload from me. If you were paying attention to all of the details that landed you here in this video, then you know that we're going to be talking about the media disaster that is the movie It Ends With Us, because apparently what it ends with is a trilogy of lawsuits. Over the last few months, we have all collectively watched what was a fumble when it came to the marketing of this very serious movie about DV. That fumbling then led to some rumors about an on-set feud, and then those rumors led to three lawsuits. There has been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumor, and honestly a lot of misinformation on the internet when it comes to these cases and proceedings. Today, what I would like to do is walk through the highlights of each case because these things are 50 to 80 pages long. We are not trying to go through line by line, but what we're gonna do is look at the primary sources, highlight what is the most important, and then compare the evidence where it is applicable. I also feel like now is a really great time to add the disclosure that I am not a lawyer, okay? I am just a person on the internet with a lot of opinions who loves history and philosophy because it requires the ability to look at a primary source document and dissect arguments and recognize different patterns, especially when it comes to very intense topics. So that is all that I'm really hoping to do here today, is to sort through those things and dissect the nonsense where it exists. With all of that said, everything that's talked about in these cases is alleged. Any opinions stated are my own, and this is all based on public documents which were first released by public figures. With all of that said, and the algorithm gods pleased, let's go ahead and get right into today's video, shall we?
I saw the red flags, but they didn't look red. They looked kind of fuchsia and cute.
I feel like as I launch this story, the most important thing to do here is to really set you up with some background information and to introduce all the cast and crew who are going to be a part of this story. And you'll have to excuse my corny movie puns here. I don't actually literally mean the cast and crew of the movie itself, but rather the people who are listed as either plaintiffs or claimants within any or all of these court cases. First, let me introduce the two stars you might recognize. The first is Blake Lively, an actress most known for her role as Serena van der Woodsen on Gossip Girl. She makes up one half of a Hollywood power couple being married to Ryan Reynolds and is besties with Taylor Swift. The second is Justin Baldoni. Justin is most known for his role in Jane the Virgin. He is the founder of Wayfarer Studio, as well as the director and leading man in the movie It Ends With Us. The rest of this crew is going to be mostly unknown to you because they are people who would typically run in the background. Financiers, business people, and also publicists. And I have a feeling that after we get through all of these court documents, they're going to wish that that was still true, that people didn't know who they were. First is Jamie Heath, CEO of Wayfarer Studio, and he is also described as one of Justin's close friends. Then we have Steve Sarowitz, who is a financier for Wayfarer and Justin's business partner. Next up are the publicists, who include Stephanie Jones, Justin's past publicist and owner of Joneswork PR firm. And then we have Jennifer Abel, who is Justin's current publicist and Stephanie's past employee. There is a whole mess surrounding that, and don't you worry, we are going to get into it. Next, we have Melissa Nathan, who is a crisis management publicist for Justin and Wayfarer Studio. Then we have Jed Wallace, who was hired by Melissa to assist in the crisis management for social media, specifically to create organic posts on Reddit and TikTok. And finally, we have Leslie Sloan, who is Blake's publicist. I know that that is a long list of names and it's very winding and confusing. I promise I will keep us organized as we sift through the chaos.
What was important to me for Lily is that she didn't come into it from a delicate place, that she didn't come into it as somebody who was super vulnerable.
On December 21st, 2024, Blake Lively's complaint that she had made to the California Civil Rights Department about what she'd been through on the set of It Ends With Us became public information as it was published alongside a New York Times article. In this complaint, Blake laid out some pretty gruesome details about the things that happened to her and other cast members on the set of It Ends With Us. She included the way she tried to remedy some of the situations, and then eventually how she filed a formal set of protections with her legal counsel, and those required an all-hands-on-deck HR meeting before she would resume filming. It also walks us all the way through to the point of her now filing this complaint, because within those protections, she specifically requested that she not be retaliated against for those protections or for bringing up the HR complaints that she did. And so this formal complaint is now because she does feel that she's being retaliated against. I do think it's important to add here, for some context, I have seen other legal commentators actually talking about Blake having to file this the way that she did as a Civil Rights Department complaint, because in the state of California, that is a requirement when it has to do with your workplace. And she had to do this to be able to move forward and sue Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studio. I am going to go ahead and link some of those legal commentators in my description box in case you're interested in hearing their perspectives. Blake's complaint is a challenging read because she really painted a very vivid picture of a toxic work environment where Justin Baldoni and Jamie Heath were at the center of it all. Her claims included things like harassment, retaliation, and emotional distress. Some of the most alarming complaints included specific examples of very toxic and inappropriate behavior on the set. Some of these examples included Justin improvising kisses during scenes, and in one case, while filming a silent slow dance, he leaned in, dragged his lips from her ear to her neck, and whispered, "It smells so good." When Blake objected, Justin reportedly brushed it off and said, "I'm not even attracted to you." He also allegedly changed the script from the one that Blake had agreed to have the new one include more nude scenes, including one where she would be required to orgasm on camera. When Blake protested these changes, Justin allegedly claimed that it was important that she do it so that the film would have the proper female gaze. And then there was the birth scene. Blake states that Justin and Jamie pressured her at the last minute to simulate full nudity during the birth scene, despite that not being in Blake's script. They said it would provide more realism to the scene because women don't wear clothes during birth. Justin even went as far as to cite his own wife, who apparently ripped all her clothes off during labor. Blake, by the way, is a mother of 4 children, so I have a feeling that she understands how the birthing process works, but also that no two women's experiences are going to be the same. But I digress. While all of that is already problematic, it's compounded by the fact that Justin and Jamie shirked industry standards. No closed set, no intimacy coordinator, no nudity writer in place, and monitors showing the footage were accessible to the entire cast and crew on their personal devices. Blake's complaints also included various allegations that these two men would talk about their very personal private lives on set, including that they both had past corn addictions. I hate that I have to say it that way. I'll try to censor it on the screen here, but they were talking about their addictions nonetheless. At one point, Justin even added to a story that when he was younger, he didn't always ask for permission or consent. And then even if he did, he didn't always listen to a no. This made Blake and others incredibly uncomfortable. And I think that's an interesting piece of Blake's complaint, is that there's a witness for nearly every single thing she talks about. The other thing she included is that these two men were always touching and hugging on the cast and crew on set, and if you tried to avoid that touch, they would become cold, irritable, and uncollaborative. But here's the most important thing I uncovered in Blake's claim, and that is the revelation that Wayfarer Studio had 0 HR department set up. That means that Justin and Jamie were investigating claims about Justin and Jamie. There is even mention of Jamie joking and making light about this on the second day of filming when he hugged a staffer and said, "I don't even know if we're allowed to do this. It's day one and we have an HR complaint already." After they set the scene for what it was like to exist on the set of It Ends With Us as Blake Lively or another cast member, they go ahead and walk us through the various remedies that they put in place, including the very final one where she brought her legal counsel in to go ahead and lay out the protections for return to production. And this included 17 points to protect Blake and other cast and crew from unwanted touching, to protect them when it came to shooting nude scenes or protecting their privacy in their trailers. These points included that there should be no retaliation against Blake for raising these concerns, and these protections were signed for, and they did also host the all-hands meeting that was requested to ensure that these would be followed as filming resumed. Filming for It Ends With Us ended in February 2024, but by then it appears the damage was done and the fallout was imminent. As promotion for the movie began, something was off. Blake and the cast were promoting the film together, and Justin was seemingly off on his own, doing his own thing and promoting the movie in a completely different way from the rest of the cast and crew. Social media, as they do, flagged this very quickly, and rumors began to swirl. What happened after that is that old interviews of Blake's started to resurface, and people were swift to criticize her for her marketing strategy, like encouraging audiences to grab their friends and wear their florals for a movie about breaking the cycle of DV. The backlash was swift and relentless, and Blake ended up wiping all of her personal and social media accounts, citing these attacks. This is where she makes her most evidenced allegation, and that is that Justin and his team of publicists created this entire narrative on social media to bury her.
The question that's always asked is, why did she stay? And that's the wrong question. What we need to be asking ourselves is, why do men harm?
After Blake's complaint went public alongside a New York Times article entitled "We Can Bury Anyone" inside a Hollywood smear campaign, Justin went ahead and filed his own lawsuit. He was suing the New York Times for $250 million, claiming defamation of character, but also he aired some grievances about them not giving his team enough time to respond to inaccuracies in the story, and they complained that the New York Times published the story 2 hours before they planned to, which means clearly they did not care about his side of the story. His team's frustration is palpable in this document. They wasted zero time taking their swipes at both the New York Times, but also Blake Lively, stating within the first page their belief that Blake's claims are patently false and that she took the approach that she did, filing her complaint through the Civil Rights Department, because she wouldn't survive discovery and therefore never planned to actually sue Justin Baldoni or Wayfarer Studio. Now, there are two things here that I think are important to point out in response to what his team has just said. The first is that we now know that Blake Lively has indeed sued Justin Baldoni in the state of New York. The second is an interesting thing that I've seen pointed out again by legal commentators, and that is that Justin filed his suit against the New York Times in California. So that means he and his team, as they're chiding Blake for never actually suing him, they went ahead and set this up so that they have an immediate legal hurdle in their way, and that is proving jurisdiction. And again, a lot of legal commentators think that that was a choice. So I think it's worth pointing out in this video. Once Justin's lawsuit went public, the internet did what the internet does, and people were suddenly coming out, commentators and commenters alike, to support Justin. They were saying he had come with more receipts. His receipts proved that Blake lied. They proved that her team had manipulated evidence. He was vindicated. And I needed to know if this was true, which is how I fell into this rabbit hole. Spoiler alert, it's complicated, But what I found is that the old adage remains true, that quantity does not always mean quality. Before we get into the specifics of Justin's lawsuit, I want to make it clear that Blake's complaint came first and was published as a part of the New York Times. Justin's is in response to that. So it's fair, in my opinion, for me to compare the things that he is saying to the things that she has said, and to compare where their evidence lines up, where it's applicable. We're going to find that there were some things that he completely ignored that were inside of Blake's complaint. Honestly, I have a lot of questions, and I feel like you will too once we get through this. So the central grievance of Justin's lawsuit is that the New York Times released this article covering Blake's complaint without his side of the story. They're claiming libel, false light invasion of privacy, promissory fraud, and breach of implied in fact contract. It's within this suit that they give his version of events of what happened on set. Justin's lawyers argued immediately that Blake's team had taken things out of content and edited text messages in the complaint. The gotcha moment they're pointing to involves text messages between Justin's publicist Jennifer Abel and Melissa Nathan, the hired crisis PR expert. Jennifer compliments Melissa, saying, "You really outdid yourself on this story," to which Melissa replies, "That's why you hired me, right? I'm the best." Justin's team added bold red arrows to this document to highlight the omission of an emoji, claiming it shows the conversation was not serious, but rather sarcastic, juvenile banter, and no evidence of seeding stories. Several online legal experts, again, I'm going to go ahead and lean on them here in this moment, they have explained the difference between these text messages in Blake's complaint and in Justin's. In Blake's complaint, they share that these messages were likely extracted from the cell phone using an INT tool, and that tool might remove the emoji, or it might make it so that it's illegible. It might be a box with a symbol in it. So either way, they would not have known what the emoji was. Where Justin's team has the actual screenshots from a phone, which would then show the emoji. To me, whether the emoji is there or not, none of this really undoes Blake's larger claims. And I think that that's really important because, again, this is being used as a gotcha moment to basically say that all of Blake's claims are false. And on that note, this whole thing keeps getting murkier the more you look at the text messages that Justin's team included. And I think that this is especially important because they are calling out the New York Times for not realizing that they were looking at doctored text messages. What they've included in these screenshots is an earlier part of the conversation where Melissa can be seen saying, "Damn, this is unfair because that's also not me." And they're doing this to seemingly prove that the story that's been shared about Blake Lively was not planted by Melissa. But let's zoom in on this screenshot. Do you see anything here that just calls out to you? Do you see the keyboard that's in the middle of the image indicating that a screenshot was taken and shared mid-conversation? You can also tell because the little two blue boxes that they're leaning into saying, "Damn, this isn't fair, I didn't do this," are smaller than the cool thanks that are under it. Again, I think it's important for us to call out these sort of discrepancies and ask questions because they are specifically calling out the New York Times for not knowing about doctored text messages while using their own Frankenstein text messages to make their point. Now, they have pages and pages and pages of text messages in here. Why would they not have included even more of this conversation up beyond that screenshot to show that this conversation was organic and that they weren't actually planting stories? This selective presentation leaves me with more questions than answers. Other text messages that they used as evidence also fell flat. One prime example of this, in my opinion, is when it comes to the claims about invading Blake's privacy while she was breastfeeding in her trailer. They say that that cannot be true because once upon a time she invited them to come and practice lines while she was breastfeeding. First things first, that is consent, and consent is not universal, and it's also not permanent. So there's that. Second, if you look at the screenshots that they included in their own suit, you can see that Blake did not invite them to her trailer while she was feeding, but rather while she was pumping. This, in my opinion, is an important distinction because women are able to cover while pumping more easily than while they're feeding. I found entire threads of women talking on the internet about how discreet it is to pump. Some of them saying they even do it while they're shopping at the grocery store, and no one is any the wiser. This is not the same as actively feeding a baby who you might want to keep an eye on and who might be wriggling around and pulling the covers off. Blake might have felt comfortable inviting them in this one time because, again, she's pumping, her baby's not there maybe, she's more in control of the situation. With all of my speculation on that aside, here's the thing that sticks out to me even more glaringly than any of that. If you read this entire text message that they chose to include in their own suit as evidence, you can see that it didn't even matter that she invited them while she was pumping, because by the time Justin got done eating, she was done and they actually met in hair and makeup. So this isn't actually the bombshell evidence that anyone thinks that it is. Hey everyone, Editing Sam here. I forgot to mention that in Justin's lawsuit, he also in this section says, well, Blake was comfortable with breastfeeding around us because she often had to do it in production areas. And it's interesting because when you're reading Blake's claims, she's basically stating that her workplace did not provide her with room and time to pump or breastfeed while she was working. So again, it's kind of not a good look for them to say, well, she was comfortable because she already had to do that in the production area, when that is a thing in most states that you are supposed to provide to your employees. So again, just another interesting little point. I'm going to let you get back to the video. In another example, Justin's team once again went ahead with these big bold red arrows and started showing us where things were excluded in the text messages. The problem is, the messages that had been excluded didn't change the substance of the messages and were adding irrelevant padding to their lawsuit. So, for example, on page 67, when they're sharing this message in Blake's complaint that reads, "Hi team, so far extremely limited pickup on Daily Mail or page 6. We'll continue to keep an eye out and send pieces as needed, but so far it's been steady coverage on speculation. We've also started to see a shift on social, largely due to Jed and his team's efforts to shift the narrative towards Blake and Ryan." Justin's team highlighted the messages that came after this because they think it's important to show what was excluded, but when you actually look at these messages, what you see is just literal chit-chat about hopping on a Zoom call and how they might be off camera because they look rough. And they do the same thing on the next page where Melissa Nathan can be seen saying, "The majority of socials are just so pro-Justin, and I don't even agree with half of them." The rest of these messages that his team are trying to point out were excluded, again, add no additional substance. The one message still stands that Jed and his team are changing the way that people are viewing things on social media. They're swaying public perception. And also, they're going to continue to send stories as needed to suppress what are bad stories about Justin potentially coming out on the Daily Mail or page 6. That's what's happening in these conversations. Nothing that Justin's team marked as excluded changes that substance or story. These are things that his team was actively doing and writing down in text messages. So now we're getting to another claim that I feel like is a big one, and that has to do with the intimacy coordinator. Blake's complaint says there was no intimacy coordinator on set. Justin's complaint supposedly proves that there was. In fact, they claim they even have proof that Blake didn't want to work with the intimacy coordinator. But again, when we review this message, what we see is it appears that Justin was having conversations with the intimacy coordinator before filming began. It's my opinion, based on her complaint, that Blake had agreed to a script she had seen and likely assumed there would be no major changes made. Therefore, she felt comfortable saying she would meet with the intimacy coordinator, who should be on set, when filming started. Justin also implies that this was before filming began because he says, "until we start," and then discussed how this might mess up his workflow. Blake's complaint is that the intimacy coordinator was not on set during active filming that required nudity or those sort of explicit scenes. Justin's text messages in this suit do not disprove that claim. They don't. It's so clear when you read the actual thing that they've included that this is pre-filming. They also go on to say Justin should just take notes and share those with Blake after the fact. And it was this part of the text message chain that made me question how this whole thing works, honestly, with intimacy coordinators. But in my brain, it would make sense that since you hired this person, they could take notes and they'll be working with Blake on set. So why wouldn't they relay this information to her? Why wouldn't they share with her that it was their idea to make these changes and then continue to work with her to make sure she was comfortable? I guess I was just left wondering if Justin was putting himself into positions he maybe shouldn't have. But again, I'm not an actor or director. I'm curious to see how this will play out as these court cases progress. Now, there were two things in this suit that I thought really needed to be called out because honestly, they just came across as real shady to me. And the first has to do with them claiming that Blake's publicist seeded some stories about Justin, including one that he was a predator. Now, the reason that this is shady to me is the evidence that they've included and the way they've set this evidence up, okay? So the page that you're seeing on screen now, you can see on the left are the text messages. But then, interestingly, on the right, they've put that this is the truth, okay? So now let me explain what we're looking at. On the left are messages between James, who is a Daily Mail reporter, and Blake's publicist, Leslie Sloan. She's asking him about a story, saying what is going on, the whole cast doesn't like Justin, has nothing to do with Blake, and telling him that Justin's team is panicking because no one likes him. Then, on the right side of this screen, where they've listed it as the truth, James is sending those two screen messages that are on the right over to Melissa Nathan, who again is Justin's PR crisis team, right? You can see, if you actually look at this primary source document, you can see word for word that those two screenshots are exactly what you're seeing on the left-hand side of the screen. And I think that that's important because under the so-called truth, James has sent these messages to Melissa, and then he says Leslie said that Blake was SA'd, even though that statement exists nowhere in her messages to him. Again, we know this because they've blown them up and we can see them on the left-hand side of the screen. Leslie never said that here. So either Justin's team made a mistake and excluded that, or they've just completely made this up. The following pages don't get any better. They just continue to share these text messages from James of the Daily Mail, and all he really proves is that Blake's publicist, Leslie, does not like Melissa Nathan. Now, that's not a crime, and so I guess I'm just confused why they chose to include that, but also why they listed his telling as the truth. The other moment where Justin's team is just outright shady is in their description of what happened between Jamie Heath and Blake Lively when it came to him showing her birthing footage from his wife. Yeah, within Justin's lawsuit, his team claims that Blake straight up mischaracterized that situation, saying that Jamie showed her corn. Again, so sorry that I have to call it that. I'm going to try to put it on screen. Hopefully we don't get demonetized. But they say that she mischaracterized that entire situation and blew that thing out of proportion. But what I would like to point out is that if you go back to Blake's claim and actually look at it, she didn't say that. She said that's what she thought she was seeing. And when she tried to stop him, he then clarified, no, this is birthing footage from my wife, and it's okay if I show this to you because she's not weird about stuff like this. So once again, Justin's team is saying that Blake mischaracterized something while blatantly mischaracterizing something, because we can go back and look at Blake's claim and see exactly what she said. So again, why would they include this? Maybe because a majority of people are not actually going to cross-compare the documents, which is why I think it's important to include that here. Blake never mischaracterized. She explained exactly what happened, and their two stories of what happened actually end up lining up, which means they've just proved that Blake's claim might have been true. Now, it feels unfair not to cover Justin's claims in more detail, but I'm going to be honest, these things are 50 to 80 pages long, and I'm not trying to keep you here all day. There are legal commentators who have covered these things line by line by line. What I will tell you is the rest of his lawsuit does get his version of events out on paper, and most of it is him claiming that Blake was hard to work with and that she blackmailed them with the protections she wanted put in place. Every explanation provided for why they did something included language that they had to do it so she would return to set, or they had to do it to make her happy. They did not deny signing the document asking for protections, and actually, they included some statements saying that his legal team, when they reviewed it, responded and said, yeah, these protections are totally appropriate, and some of them are already in place. That leaves me wondering which ones were not in place. If I'm honest, this is how this whole thing went for me, okay? Justin's lawsuit left me with more questions than answers. His team did a really great job telling his side of the story, but not necessarily disproving Blake's claims, and there were a lot of her claims that they didn't even touch. So I'm curious to see how that whole thing is going to unravel. But there's another component to this entire story that makes it so incredibly messy, and that is the whole PR fiasco. There are messages within these two documents that show Justin himself asking for a strong defense and sharing his paranoia that Blake is going to share the HR complaints publicly. He even shares articles with the headlines he thinks will be useful to his team, including stories of women, quote, weaponizing feminism and, quote, bullying other women, stating that these are what his team will need to be successful. But there are also many times where he reaches out to this same team asking, are we using bots? And does this make it look like we're planting stories to take her down? I don't want it to look that way. And this whole thing left me feeling a little bit confused, and it honestly made me wonder if Justin even had an understanding of what this team of publicists was capable of doing. Is it possible that he did not fully understand the depths that they were willing to go to protect him?
Even the PR agents that are being sued were like, yeah, but she deserved it.
I swear, this story feels like it's never ending. And the more layers I peeled back, the wilder the entire thing got. The spotlight is now squarely shown on the shady underbelly of the public relations industry, specifically the way that celebrity publicists are working with the media to shape public perception. I think the light that is shining squarely on this industry is going to be one of the most revealing of this entire situation. Many of the text messages in question in this entire case come from the work phone of one Jennifer Abel because she mistakenly believed that her work communications were private. And thus, the final lawsuit of the trilogy is born. Stephanie Jones, Justin's former publicist and the owner of Jones Work, is suing her former employee, Jennifer Abel, along with Justin's company and their crisis management team. According to this lawsuit, Jennifer allegedly played a key role in managing events after the movie wrapped and marketing began. She's accused of secretly hiring crisis management professionals, Melissa Nathan and Jed Wallace, to assist in protecting Justin's reputation. The lawsuit also claims that Jennifer's decisions created significant tension, potentially setting up Stephanie as the fall person for any negative press. This case becomes even more intriguing when you learn that Jennifer intended to leave Jones' work to start her own PR firm, aiming to take some of Stephanie's clients with her, including Justin. The lawsuit details Jennifer and Melissa's plan to take down Blake Lively. In this document, we can see that they've concluded that in order to protect the reputations of Justin, Jamie, and Wayfarer Studios, they're going to plant stories about Lively's negative onset experiences by painting her as a person who, quote, weaponizes feminism. The leaked messages between Jennifer and Melissa are central to this entire story. In one exchange, Jennifer told Melissa to brace for a follow-up call because Justin wasn't entirely satisfied with the plan document they had sent over. Melissa replied with, "Of course, but you know we can't send him documents with our work in them. That will get us into trouble." She also said, "We can't write it down to him. We can't say we will destroy her. We will do this." She then goes on to say, "You know, we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him." And just while I'm thinking about it, these are perhaps the most damning text messages in this entire debacle, and Justin's team didn't address them at all. They didn't try to say that they were fake or altered or taken out of context. So I'm curious how that will play out for him in that lawsuit, since they're saying they're suing the New York Times because they didn't run a smear campaign. I feel like these are the text messages that you would have wanted to address, like front and center. It's as you work through this story with the Publicists that all the pieces of the puzzle start to fall together and all of the pieces of the timeline start to really line up, and you can see what people were doing behind the scenes and the way that things were being sort of shifted this way and that based on the way they needed to go to either suppress stories or send negative stories on Blake. And they really put everything in text messages. I mean, everything. We saw earlier how they were saying all of the press is positive for Justin and we don't even agree with half of it. But even in these messages, we see Jennifer saying really mean things about Justin behind his back, including calling him cringy, pompous, unlikable, and unrealistic as a leading man. And all I can think is, like, that has to hurt. And she is now sitting alongside him as his hired publicist, but also as a part of these lawsuits where maybe she's caused a little bit of tension here for Justin, even if he didn't cause the problems himself. Again, all of this is still being unraveled, so it's impossible to tell where things are going to end up.
I saw the red flags, but they didn't look red. They looked kind of fuchsia and cute.
As these cases unfold, it's clear to me that we're only just scratching the surface. There is so much yet to come. And even though there's going to be a lot to unpack, one thing is still certain. Two things can be true at the same time. It can be true that Blake fumbled through interviews. It can be true that Blake was rude to interviewers. It can be true that she was tone deaf, promoting her alcohol brand, and being disconnected from the movie's true messaging. All of that can be true. And it still doesn't negate the fact that she could have gone through the things that she's alleged she's gone through on set. Both of those truths can exist, no matter how messy it looks from the outside. And that same logic can apply to Justin. It can be true that he broke contractual obligations and changed his own marketing plan for the movie when he felt excluded. And that could have been driven by his desire to protect his own reputation and to protect the film's success. But it can also be true that behind closed doors that none of us were also behind, sometimes his actions didn't land appropriately. This duality is what makes these cases so complex. People are rarely all good or all bad, and the truth tends to fall somewhere in that gray space in between. And the problem with the internet is that they don't like the gray space. It's a very black or white type of universe here. You're either this or that. There's zero in between. So while we wait for more details to come to light, I think it's worth remembering that it's worth continuing to challenge ourselves to think about what lies beyond the headlines. All right, that is all I have for you all today. And at this point, I am just so genuinely curious to know what you think about all of this. I'm curious to know if you've been following this case from the get-go. What are the rumors you've heard? What are the things you tend to believe? Did you learn anything new in this video? Because again, there's not been a lot of people doing side-by-side comparisons without doing like a 7-hour live stream. And I'm also curious to know, did you hear anything in this that made you consider changing your opinion? Because sometimes new information is how we grow and how we change opinions. So I'd be curious to know. I hope you will share your feedback with me. And I know that this is a very contentious topic. I am hoping, based on the audience we have built here, that we will be able to be respectful with our comments. So please, please, please share them with me down below. I am interested to see what you all think about this media circus. And for all my introvert friends out there who may not feel comfortable leaving your opinion in an internet comment section, I see you. Go ahead and leave me a flower emoji of your choice this week, because honestly, the marketing slogan, "Grab your friends, wear your florals," is going to haunt my nightmares. As always, thank you all so much for being here with me this week. I will see you in the next one. Bye!